Have you ever stopped to think about what makes a villain truly terrifying? It's not strength, it's not raw power, it's not even cruelty. What really gets under your skin is when you look at a villain and think, I understand why people follow this person. When the manipulation is so sophisticated that you, watching from the outside with all the information in your hands, still feel a sting of sympathy. You can still see why Denji fell, why everyone fell. That's what Makima does to us, and that's why she isn't just a standout villain in Chainsaw Man. She is one of the most disturbing antagonist constructions Japanese media has ever produced. But to understand why she's so devastating, we need to start from the beginning, the right way, the world that makes Makima possible. Chainsaw Man exists in a universe where fear is literal. Devils are born from humanity's collective fear. The more people fear something, the more powerful that devil becomes. Fear of snakes, fear of fire, fear of death. Everything takes on shape, teeth, and claws. And within that logic, Fujimoto builds something brilliant. If fear creates power, then what happens to a creature that is, in its very essence, the concept of control itself? Makima is the control devil, but not a crude kind of control, not chains and cages, subtle control, the kind you don't notice until you're already completely trapped, the kind that doesn't feel like control because it was designed to feel like love, care, and purpose. And there lies the first layer of the terror she represents. Denji never had a chance, not one. Put yourself in Denji's shoes for a second. You grew up without a family, without money, without any prospect of a future. You slept next to a devil dog because he was the only living creature that didn't treat you like trash. You had debts you could never repay. You lived eating stale bread and dreaming of the basics: a warm bed, real food, a hand that wouldn't push you away. And then Makima appears. She looks you in the eyes. She treats you like a human being. She makes you feel like you matter, like you have a role, like your existence means something. She gives you structure, food, a roof, companions. She rests her hand on your head as if you were precious. For someone who never had any of that, that's not seduction, that's resuscitation. Fujimoto knew exactly what he was doing when he built Denji that way. He isn't naive because he's stupid. He's vulnerable because he was shaped to be, and Makima chose him because of that. She didn't stumble across Denji by accident. She identified him as someone who could be molded, directed, controlled, because the wound was wide open. That's what real manipulators do. They don't seek out the strong. They seek out the ones who are starving for affection. The smile that reveals nothing. One of the most technically brilliant things Fujimoto does with Makima is visual. She almost always appears from a distance, with her back turned or wearing that serene smile that gives absolutely nothing away about what she's thinking. You spend entire chapters trying to read her face and walking away empty-handed. It's like trying to understand what a marble sculpture is feeling. And that's not random. In psychology, the inability to read someone's emotions creates a state of hypervigilance. We start paying attention to every detail, searching for clues. And in that search, we involuntarily become more attached. The more opaque someone is, the more mental energy we spend trying to decode them. Makima uses that as a weapon. She is strategically unreadable. With Denji, she mixes moments of clinical coldness with calculated gestures of tenderness. One moment, she's distant and professional. The next, she lets his rest his head on her shoulder. That inconsistency isn't a narrative oversight, it's intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that keeps people trapped in abusive relationships. You never know when the warmth is coming, so you keep trying to deserve it. Denji spends the entire series trying to deserve Makima. She never lied. That's the most terrifying part. This is where we get to the core of what makes Makima different from conventional villains. She doesn't hide that she wants to use the Chainsaw Man. She says it. Not in those exact words, not in a way Denji processes it, but she puts her cards on the table multiple times throughout the narrative. She talks about her objective, talks about what she wants from the Chainsaw Man's power, talks about the world she wants to build. But Denji can't hear that as a threat, because the voice saying those things is the same voice that was gentle with him.
The human brain has enormous difficulty separating the message from the messenger when an emotional bond is involved. It's the same reason we sometimes hear perfect advice from a stranger and ignore it, and hear terrible advice from someone we love and obey it. Makima understood that at a near-human level. She didn't need to lie because she knew the truth, wrapped in the affection she created, would be processed as harmless. The plan that was always in motion. When we reach the full revelation of what Makima was doing, it feels like the floor being pulled from under your feet. Everything that looked like support was positioning. Every character she brought close to Denji, she calculated the emotional impact of removing power. Aki. Every loss was architected to shape the Chainsaw Man's psychological state, to push him to a level of despair that would release more power. She wasn't building an ally, she was cultivating a weapon. And the most brutal part is that she did it with care, with patience, with a dedication that out of context would look like love. Fujimoto is making a statement about how systems of control work in the real world. The most efficient ones don't use force, they use structure. They create dependency. They make you believe you need them, that without them you're nothing, that the pain you feel is part of the growth they're providing. Makima is, in allegorical terms, a critique of institutional power disguised as benevolence. The control devil and what she really wanted. But here, the narrative gets even more complex, because Makima isn't just cold and calculating. She has a genuine desire, in her own twisted way. She wants a world where fear has been erased, where diseases, wars, and death no longer exist. She wants to use the Chainsaw Man's power to devour those concepts of fear and free humanity from them. It's a goal that on paper sounds almost noble. And there lies the final layer of what makes her disturbing. She isn't driven by empty cruelty. She has a vision, and she's willing to destroy anything and anyone in the path of that vision, because in her logic, the end justifies every fragment of the means. That puts her in a different category of antagonists, not the villain who wants power for power's sake, the villain who genuinely believes she's doing what is necessary. And that kind of antagonist is the hardest to fight, inside the story and outside it, because conviction creates an internal coherence that's almost impossible to break with simple arguments. You can't just tell Makima she's wrong. She'll agree with the facts and disagree with the conclusion. She built a value system where every atrocity she committed has a justified place.
The defeat that isn't really a defeat. And then comes the moment when Denji finally understands everything. When the veil falls and the reality of who Makima is becomes completely exposed. The scene that follows is one of the most symbolically loaded in the manga. Denji doesn't beat her with strength, he beats her with something she was never able to map: love without function. She understood dependency, worship, fear, but genuine love without expectation of return, without being transactional, that was outside her parameters. It's almost ironic. The control devil was defeated by the only human behavior that resists control. But Denji's victory isn't glorious. It's sad. It's exhausted. It's the kind of victory that leaves a scar because you had to destroy something you loved in order to survive. And that is Fujimoto's final statement. Some prisons take the shape of people you wished had been real. Well, Makima represents beyond fiction. Fujimoto didn't create Makima in a vacuum. She's a construction that speaks directly to patterns that exist in the real world. Think about how power structures perpetuate themselves. Not generally through brute force, that creates visible resistance. They perpetuate themselves by building narratives of dependency, making groups and individuals believe that without a certain structure, a certain leader, a certain system, they wouldn't survive, that the suffering they feel is necessary, that the alternative would be worse. Makima is the personification of that mechanism. She is what happens when power dresses itself as protection so convincingly that the controlled person defends the very control keeping them trapped. And Fujimoto had the courage to show that from an uncomfortable angle. Sometimes we only realize we were trapped after we've already lost something that isn't coming back. Why she still haunts you after it's over? There are characters you finish a story and forget. They're functional, they serve their purpose, they pass. Makima doesn't pass, she stays.
She stays because Fujimoto built her with layers that keep making sense the more you think about it. She stays because she represents something we recognize, not necessarily in fictional villains, but in dynamics that exist around us, in relationships, in systems, in authority figures who always knew exactly which button to press to maintain loyalty. She stays because the question she raises has no easy answer. If someone offered you exactly what you needed most in your life and the price was your autonomy, would you recognize it before you'd already paid? Most people who were controlled by someone like Makima in the real world, in far less supernatural ways, only understood what was happening afterward, when the loss had already happened, when the scar had already formed. That's not weakness, that's the nature of the mechanism. Fujimoto and the courage not to simplify his characters. What sets Chainsaw Man apart from many other works in the genre is Fujimoto's refusal to simplify his characters so the audience feels comfortable. Makima could have been presented as clearly evil from the start. That would have been easier to digest. We would have rooted against her without any internal conflict. But Fujimoto did something different. He let you like her, let you understand why Denji liked her. He put you in the same emotional trap as the protagonist. And when the revelation came, the discomfort was doubled, not just from the brutality of what she did, but from the awareness that you too were, in some measure, manipulated by the narrative itself. That is high-level literature, using the structure of the story as a mirror for the very theme being discussed. You didn't just read about manipulation, you experienced a safe version of it. Makima's legacy in the Chainsaw Man universe. With the arrival of Asamitaka and Nayuta in the following arc, Fujimoto continues exploring the same thematic territory, but from different angles. Makima's shadow is present even when she's not on the page, because the trauma she left in Denji shapes every decision he makes from that point forward. That is character construction that breathes beyond its own pages. Makima didn't end when Denji defeated her. She keeps existing in the way he hesitates, in the way he mistrusts affection, in the way he looks at Nayuta with a mixture of genuine love and the fear of repeating. The most effective villain isn't the one you defeat, it's the one who changes you permanently. So here's the question that's going to keep echoing. If Makima had been honest with Denji from the very beginning about who she was, what she wanted, and the price he would pay, do you think he would have chosen differently?